My stepmother and father are heading off on a honeymoon with their daughters, leaving me alone. Can you believe it? So, I made a decision, they're not coming back to my house. You see, I'm 22 years old, and this house? It's legally mine. It's where I grew up, where I made all my memories, and the home my mom left to me when she passed away last year. She was just 47 when a sudden stroke took her from me. It was a devastating shock, but I found peace with it now. My parents divorced when I was 7, and I split my time between them. Half the month with Mom, the other half with Dad. But honestly, I was always closer to my mom. She got me, you know? My dad, on the other hand, he's 50 now, always seemed too busy for me. Work, women, pretty much everything else came first. I never really felt like I was his priority, but I didn't mind too much because I had my mom. When I turned 18 and started college, my dad decided to move to Houston for work. We barely saw each other after that, just holidays, mostly. Then, 2 years ago, he dropped a bombshell at Christmas. He brought Julia. She was his new girlfriend, 38 years old, and she didn't come alone. Julia brought her 2 daughters, 18 and 16 at the time, from her previous relationship with her high school boyfriend. It was unexpected, to say the least. Dad had never introduced us to any of his girlfriends before. But, you know, we tried our best. We welcomed them warmly, made them feel at home, and honestly, it was a nice evening. We all got along better than I'd expected. After that, even when I talked to my dad on the phone, things felt normal. But now? Oh, things are far from normal. Julia was always so sweet to me. She'd greet me warmly every time, and honestly, I appreciated it. Her daughters, on the other hand, were a bit shy and introverted. They mostly kept to themselves, but overall, we got along fine. After my mom passed away, I found out she had left me the house. I was shocked but grateful. Mom had divided her assets around my 18th birthday because she liked to plan ahead, even in situations like this. Since I just graduated, moving into my childhood home felt like the right thing to do. It was my sanctuary, the one place that felt like me. I decided to find a job nearby so I wouldn't have to leave anytime soon. But, of course, my dad wasn't thrilled when he found out Mom had left the house to me. At the funeral, Dad and Julia were kind and supportive. But once he learned about the will, his mood shifted. This house wasn't just any house, it was the home my parents had bought together when they first got married. After the divorce, my mom kept it, and honestly, it was a fair deal. Dad didn't pay alimony even though Mom gave up her career to raise me while he focused on work. Keeping the house was the least she deserved. Despite that, my dad clearly wasn't happy. He didn't say much, but his behavior spoke volumes. At the time, though, I didn't care. I was mourning my mom, and his bitterness over the house was the last thing on my mind. Besides, Mom had left him her wedding jewelry and all the gifts he'd ever given her. He should have been fine with that. After the funeral, Dad and Julia went back to Houston, and I stayed in the house on my own. For a while, it was lonely but manageable. Then, about 6 months ago, Dad dropped another surprise. He was engaged to Julia and wanted to have the wedding back here. He asked if they could stay at the house during the weeks leading up to the big day. It made sense, there was plenty of space, and it would save them from hotel costs. Plus, Julia's daughters were homeschooled, so no school interruptions to worry about. I agreed for a couple of reasons. First, I was tired of living alone, and second, I genuinely liked Julia. Besides, Dad promised to split all the bills while they stayed, so it seemed like a win-win. They moved in about a month ago, and honestly, it was nice having people around. The house felt alive again, and I dreaded the thought of them leaving after the wedding. But then, 2 weeks ago, just 3 days before the wedding, Dad sat me down for a serious conversation. He asked if I'd consider letting them all live here permanently. I was stunned. He explained that the past month had been his way of easing me into the idea of living with them as a family. He thought it would be better for me than living alone, and now that things were going well, he wanted to make it permanent. Part of me wanted to say yes immediately. I liked having them here, and the idea of being part of a family again was comforting. But something held me back. His behavior after learning he wouldn't inherit the house still lingered in my mind. Was this really about me? Or was there more to it? So, instead of agreeing right away, I told him I needed time to think. It was a gut feeling, but it just didn't seem wise to make such a big decision so quickly. As much as I wanted to say yes, I knew I had to put my emotions aside and be practical. I set aside my personal feelings and told my dad I would let him know my decision after the wedding. He seemed upset but didn't press the issue. The wedding, held 10 days ago, was a great event and everyone seemed to enjoy themselves. They had planned to stay at the house for a few more days afterward before returning home, so I was preparing to let them know my decision. But before I could, they all left for their honeymoon, without even telling me. 2 days after the wedding, I woke up to find the house completely empty. Their belongings were still there, but they had vanished. I tried calling them, but no one answered for hours. Panic started to set in. I thought something might have happened. Around noon, Julia finally picked up, casually informing me that they'd all gone on their honeymoon and wouldn't be back for a week. I was stunned. Even if I wasn't invited, I expected them to at least inform me of their plans. Leaving without a word felt disrespectful. When I asked why no one had bothered to tell me, Julia brushed it off, saying they'd forgotten. She told me not to worry because they'd be back soon. I tried to explain that the issue wasn't their trip but their lack of consideration in not telling me. That's when Julia's tone shifted. She went from being sweet to cruel in an instant. She snapped that my dad was too busy to talk to me and that I needed to stop being hysterical over something so small. Then she hit me with this gem: your dad has a new family now, and you need to accept that. When we get back, I expect the house to be clean for us. That was the breaking point. Who did she think she was? I was furious, but I held my tongue and hung up. It was clear that letting them move in permanently would have been a colossal mistake. With that realization, I packed up all their belongings as carelessly as possible, stuffed them into cardboard boxes, and left them in the yard. I didn't care what happened to their things. They no longer belonged in my house. I also changed the locks, ensuring they wouldn't be able to get back in. Yesterday, they returned from their honeymoon, but I was at work. When my dad called, he was livid. He accused me of being childish and overreacting, saying their leaving without notice wasn't a big deal. I firmly told him to take his boxes and leave. If I found them on my property when I got home, I'd call the police. He insulted me before hanging up, but I refused to let it bother me. When I got home, their belongings were gone. I thought it was over, but at midnight, my dad called again. This time, Julia was on the line, apologizing for how she'd spoken to me. She retracted her previous comments and said she wanted to make amends. I wasn't having it. Her apology felt fake, a desperate attempt to smooth things over now that they knew I wasn't a pushover. I told her to leave me alone and hung up. I don't regret standing up for myself. Sometimes, you have to set boundaries, even with family. Am I the bad one for not allowing my dad and his new family to move in after they treated me poorly? I'm not stupid. I know why Julia suddenly wanted to play happy family. It became obvious that now, since I'd refused to let them live with me, they were trying to manipulate me. If she truly regretted her actions, she wouldn't have waited so long to apologize. She would have done it right after our initial phone call, or at least during their honeymoon. The delay only confirmed my suspicions. Her apology wasn't sincere. As for my dad, I don't think he regrets his behavior either. But once he realized I wasn't going to forgive them, he decided to appeal to my emotions. He tried to paint me as the heartless one, claiming I was being cruel by refusing to let them live with me. He even offered to share all the bills if I let them move in. He said he wanted to live in the house because it reminded him of my mom and accused me of being selfish for denying him that connection. He even tried to justify Julia's behavior, saying she had a bad day and didn't mean what she said. Then he added that his daughters missed me and wanted us all to start fresh. But I wasn't falling for it. I told them they weren't coming back. That's when my dad broke down, crying uncontrollably. He called me the most selfish daughter ever, saying I was prioritizing a petty disagreement with Julia over his chance to live in a house full of happy memories. He accused me of being petty because they didn't take me on their honeymoon, which wasn't even the main issue. He even claimed my mom would hate this ugly side of me. The comments on my original post weren't what I expected. Some were outright rude, but I understand the point most were trying to make. Still, I stuck to my decision. My dad doesn't deserve to move back in with me. He's been nothing but dismissive and rude, and I don't need that negativity in my life. At first, both he and Julia were kind, but the moment I said I needed time to think, their true colors showed. They probably thought they could bully me into letting them stay. Luckily, I'm not that weak. I'd rather be alone than surround myself with the wrong people. In hindsight, I should have seen the red flags. My dad's reaction to learning the house deed had been transferred to me, and not him, should have been enough. It showed just how materialistic and entitled he was. Julia's outburst only confirmed what I'd suspected. She thought she could manipulate me into submission. If she hadn't let her temper get the better of her, maybe we could have had a chance at being a family. But now, I'm relieved I saw their true nature before it was too late. I used to think I needed a family for support, especially after losing my mom and grandparents. But these people clearly aren't the support system I need. My dad has been calling and texting nonstop, begging for another chance. But they don't deserve it. They wasted their first chance, and giving them another would only hurt me more. Here's the kicker: my dad didn't just take time off from his job. He was fired months before his wedding. That's why he's so desperate to move in with me. He didn't disclose this earlier, probably thinking he could guilt-trip me into letting him and Julia live rent-free. This new revelation makes everything crystal clear. My dad and Julia never wanted a fresh start, they wanted a safety net. They saw me as a backup plan. I feel bad for him losing his job, but his dishonesty only strengthens my decision. You reap what you sow, and my dad never prioritized me. He has no right to expect me to prioritize him now. Turns out, Dad had been relying on his savings all this time, a decent stash, but guess what? After an extravagant wedding and a honeymoon that screamed luxury, he had to come clean. He told Julia the truth: they couldn't afford to move back to Houston because he couldn't pay rent. Surprise! Julia had quit her job to be a housewife after meeting my dad, so she couldn't pitch in financially. Can you believe it? Julia didn't even bother apologizing when she found out, proving my suspicions. She wasn't sorry. Not one bit. Honestly, she's as fake as they come. But hey, isn't that just the kind of wife my dad deserves? Fast forward to today, Dad calls, desperate. Just a couple of days, he pleads, asking to move in until he can find a job that pays enough for them to move forward. But I shut that down real quick. Why should I? They've been nothing but unpleasant to me, and I don't need their negativity invading my peace. He's a grown man. If he didn't have a job, why splurge on a wedding and honeymoon like he's made of money? Who does that? I told him, plain and simple, not my problem. I refused to let guilt twist my arm. He's the one who ignored his responsibilities, not me. I sent him a text reiterating my stance, polite, but firm, because I didn't want to sound like I was mocking him. But what does he do? He twists it into an attack on him, claiming I'll suffer for my decisions. Seriously? Now, Dad and Julia are leaving town, but not before making a dramatic exit. They texted me, gleefully announcing that Julia's ex-boyfriend had swooped in to save the day, sponsoring their trip back and letting them stay with him. Talk about a plot twist. Guess the ex finally decided to step up for his daughters, even if it's a bit late. I pieced together the real story. Julia's manipulation probably played a big role in getting her ex to cave. Classic Julia. But hey, I'm just relieved this chapter is finally over. They're gone, and I can breathe easy again. Yes, loneliness creeps in sometimes, but I've learned to lean on my friends. They're my real support system, and I'm lucky to have them. My life is stable, decent job, my own home, and a fresh start. Who needs more? When Dad tried calling again, months later, I finally answered out of curiosity. He dropped a bombshell. Julia had gone back to her ex. She left Dad in the dust. He sounded broken, apologetic even, asking for another chance to rebuild our relationship. But you know what? I've been through too much. I'm done. I told him, calmly but firmly, that I'm not interested in reopening old wounds. He continues to call, but I've blocked him now. My peace matters, and I won't compromise it, not for anyone. And that's that. Life moves on, and so do I. Here's to brighter days ahead. Dad didn't take it well, of course. His calls kept coming in, his messages piling up, but I'm not budging. I've made my decision, and it's final. The truth is, all of the stress, pain, and disappointment they've put me through, I'm done. I've given enough of my time and energy to people who never deserved it, and now it's about me. I'm not going to let guilt or nostalgia drag me back into that toxic mess. He can wallow in his own regret, but I won't feel bad for prioritizing my own well-being. And Julia? She's no longer a part of my life either. I've seen her for what she truly is, and I refuse to let her back in. I can't keep letting people who hurt me back into my life just because they say sorry. Actions speak louder than words, and they've shown me exactly who they are. So, I'll keep moving forward. It's not going to be easy all the time, but at least I'm finally in control of my own peace. I've learned that I matter, my happiness, my mental health, and my future. If I need help, I'll reach out to the people who've always had my back, my friends, my support system, the ones who care about me and show it every day. I've come a long way since the days of feeling isolated and stuck. My mom would be proud of the person I'm becoming, and I'm proud of myself too. It's not just about surviving anymore, it's about thriving. And now that the dead weight is gone, I'm free to do just that. So here's to my fresh start. To the lessons I've learned. To finding my strength in the hardest moments. The road ahead is mine to walk, and I'm ready to take it. And if I ever need advice or a pick-me-up, I know I can always count on the amazing community here. You've all been a huge part of this journey, and I appreciate every word of support. Goodbye, Dad. Goodbye, Julia. I'm moving on, and I'm going to be just fine.